I don't have to have gray hair to be really good at my job. I can be a fantastic attorney and just be a little bit younger than the rest of the crowd. So people were super receptive to it. And I realized, maybe the millennial, I guess, generation, because, there's a lot of like, oh, they only eat avocado toast and they're lazy and they're procrastinators and whatnot. Like, well, maybe there needs to be a voice of somebody coming in there saying, hey, as a younger guy, I work hard.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan and Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Defense Never Rests. I'm your host, Megan Henry, and today I'm joined again by my co-host, Nate Bolander. Hi, Nate.
How you doing? Good morning.
Welcome back.
Mm-hmm. 2 in a row. Let's do it.
So today we have on Matt Margolis, he's an attorney down in South Florida. And I was really excited to have Matt come on because he's marketed himself on LinkedIn as Matt the Millennial Attorney. And I just think it's like super like good. I like his marketing. And he does really funny posts, use memes a lot and kind of lightens things up. So I thought he'd be great to come on and kind of talk about his approach to how he handles cases and marketing, and just, he's just an all around like fun guy to talk to.
Yeah, I think everyone should check out his content. It's so cutting edge and hip and funny and not attorney-esque at all, I think, in a sense.
Yeah, attorneys aren't boring, guys. I swear. So with that, let's just bring him in. Hi, Matt. Thanks for coming on to this episode of The Defense Never Rests. I'm so happy to have you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on here.
And, for our listeners, Matt and I talked a few weeks ago because I found him on LinkedIn because he promotes himself as the millennial lawyer. And I was like, what better person to have on the podcast than you? And you have some great content on LinkedIn that is both funny and, appealing. So welcome. I'm so happy to have you on. But before we jump into, you being the millennial attorney for the masses, let's just talk about you and how you got here, and how you decided to go into this career, this legal career that we're all in. Was it something that you always thought you were going to do?
This meme career, this meme and TikToks and funny posts. So no, I didn't. I'll tell you the truth. I went up to Tallahassee. I went to school up at Florida State, go Noles. And I got a political science degree, just like almost everyone who wants to go to law school. But my goal was to go into government. I wanted to work maybe in government, around government. I ended up getting a master's of public policy. And while doing that, I used to see lawyers show up in front of the Florida legislature and, argue on behalf of bills or against bills. And I'm like, oh, these guys get it. These guys understand this. And someone would come up to me like, oh, I tried this case X years ago and it was under this, the previous law, and this was the result. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but obviously you know what you're talking about. You have this level of clout. I wanted to have that knowledge and perspective. So I took my LSAT that last semester of my master's. I went to law school, also Florida State. I got the law degree. I ended up working in government for an agency. I was with my then girlfriend at the time, now my wife, who, guys, I've outkicked my coverage. She's probably, this is a podcast. I don't know if people could see me, but I mean, she is, for the listeners, she's much prettier than I, much smarter as well. So
they can see you. Do you have a picture?
Oh, even better. I find a picture quick.
Give us her full name so we can all research her on Facebook and go all the time.
Right. I'll give her contact info at the end. I'll give her her business card.
Yeah, please.
Why do I have all these new friend requests?
Yeah.
She's like, Matt, what's going on? So she's like, let's go back down to South Florida. She had gotten a job. I'm like, absolutely. So I came down to South Florida. I worked at a firm for a little bit of time, also doing government related work as well as construction work, commercial litigation. And I'm now at Shapiro, Blasi, Wasserman & Herman. I do commercial litigation. I do still do a lot of government related work. And I don't want to call myself a jack of all trades because it's not quite what we want in this world. I specialize in construction. I specialize in commercial litigation, but in those realms, I do plenty of things.
Yeah. Well, I know that bit too, because I feel like, I do a lot of construction work too, but I also do a lot of premises and trucking work. But then it's like, but I do a lot of you. There's a lot you can figure a lot of other stuff out along the way. We don't like to pigeonhole ourselves.
Right.
So, how was it going from working in government to then making the transition over to like firm life? Because it is quite different.
Oh yeah, it was so weird. In government, it was more or less like an assistant general counsel. I mean that was the title, but it really did feel like a general counsel's office, like at a mid-sized company. So billing wasn't the issue, but I always had to be cognizant, right? I'm not a profit center, right? I'm here to assist members of the agency and the government and what they're doing and making their job better. So I tried the hardest not to be like a no man, and try to facilitate, let's make it work. Let's try to make it work. So then I go into firm life and I'm learning how to bill, and gosh, that was right. Like learning how to bill. I mean, you're like, all right, 10.6 review documents, and that's getting cut. So right, you're like, that's not gonna work. So I started doing that and starting to understand how to bill. And I also understood that it's okay to say no, especially when there are scenarios where there's so much exposure, there's so much risk, and it's okay to do that. And that's kind of what I learned in private life. And I've also, I still took with me like let's find creative solutions to make things work. But I definitely saw the difference between the two types of employment.
And I think Nate can probably relate, because Nate, you didn't start in a law firm either, right?
No, actually, it's such a similar path that Matt took. After undergrad, I worked for a school choice nonprofit in government. I wanted to go into government, and in the process of doing that, I thought about law school. What I did was maybe twice a week I would take an attorney out to an informative lunch. Right, like I would just say, hey, there's so many attorneys. It was Harrisburg, the state capital of Pennsylvania. I would take attorneys out to lunch. I would say, how do you like your job? What do you do? How do you, what are the good things? What are the bad things? Tell me about law school. And I probably took 25, 30 attorneys to lunch in like a year. And it was great. It was a really great experience. And I found out through that process, like you said, that's what I wanted to do. And that's what I wanted to go through. But before I joined this firm after law school, I worked for another quasi-government group. And when I came to this firm, the billing thing, again, just shocked me. I mean, it just
blows your mind.
Yeah. And I had some friends that worked at other firms who they could bill that way. They could be, today's my day, 8.0 worked on this case, and they would be fine and no problem. And I started to do that. And it was a quick realization that not only do you need to break it down, you need to break it down by email, by blink, by breath, so it was a real learning curve for me. Whereas like Megan came from a different firm, so she was used to it. But, for me, it was a real kick in the face, having to do that.
Well, but I will say billing, like once you get into it though, like you can't get out of it. Like in my non-lawyer friends, I'm like, well, like I just think in 6 minute increments, and they think I'm crazy, but I'm like, well, I'm just trained to think that way. Like that's how I structure things.
It is. I had someone, I think it was on LinkedIn, I posted about billing, and someone was like, well, how do you possibly bill in a 0.1 or a 0.2? And I'm like, how do you not bill 0.1 or 0.2?
Yeah.
I don't where's the disconnect? I honestly thought, I was like, are you crazy? You don't bill in a 0.1 or 0.2 or a 0.30, you read an email, it's a 0.1. And it's crazy. It's really changed the way I think about things too. Like, how much time am I spending? Oh, 12 minutes. Okay.
Right. I joke around with my wife about that. She's like, can you clean the apartment? I'm like, a 0.7? I don't have time for a 0.7 today. I have maybe a 0.2 available for you. So let me know. So we joke around about that.
Yeah, there are times that comment will not go well.
No, and it
I would imagine as well.
Really haven't.
I'm gonna try. I gotta try it. That's so funny. I'm definitely taking that. I'm like, oh, only got a 0.4. Just gonna make it quick.
That's right. Yep.
Oh well, we're about to go down a rabbit hole. Let's climb out of it. So, and through your experience though when you first started working at a law firm, like how was it starting out? Like, did you have like a mentor who kind of guided you through, how to transition into law firm life, or were you just kind of like left to the wolves to figure it out on your own?
So I've heard stories from friends of both scenario. I was very fortunate to have a group, not even just one mentor, but I really had about 3 when I started in the same office that, really like held my hand effectively and got me where I needed to be. So they taught me how to bill. They taught me how to, especially for insurance defense related work. So taught me how to do initial reporting, how to be diligent and make sure you're responding properly to a carrier, to a client. They really did, mentor me in that front. But I have heard horror stories of people popping into firms and they're like, here's this big stack of papers, go wild. And, it's crazy. It's definitely crazy. But luckily I didn't have that experience.
Well, I do think there is a plus and a minus to each side. I mean, when you're in that scenario that you just get a stack of whatever and you're told to go wild. I didn't personally have that experience, but again, I know people who did. And there is something to be said about learning things on the fly. I mean, the negative is you might not learn how to do things correctly, but
True.
You certainly learn how to figure things out and think creatively. I think while you might make some mistakes along the way, I think there is certainly a learning positive to that scenario. I'm glad I didn't have to do it. I'm glad I had some mentoring and training, but I know a lot of and I think it's a lot of times it's in either large defense firms that have tons of associates and it's like a churn, or even the smaller plaintiffs firms that they just don't have, the infrastructure, and resources to really train everybody. But they still end up turning out to be, I think, decent attorneys.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's something to be said for on-the-job experience where you're right. You've got 400 motion calendar hearings, and you're going every day, and you're arguing in front of that judge or multiple judges, and you're really getting that experience. And I mean, as much as you're being, you're right, kind of taken to the wolves, you are getting real valuable experience regardless. So I think that's a very fair point.
I mean, you might learn a lot of it, some of it, the hard way, when you get,
motion for sanctions,
ripped a new one. But I have very vivid recollections of certain attorneys who work for those firms on motion days, and they would have, their stack of motions they had to respond to. And it was just you just got to find that guy, that's the guy that they sent over today from that firm.
And it always happens where there's always one person who goes up in front of the judge, right, and says, Your Honor, I'm just covering this one. And then we're all in the back, right? We're all in the back. We're like, oh no.
The worst possible thing you could say.
Yep. They did it. Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Yeah, that's that. I think that is almost the kiss of death. You just have to own it, and just even if it's not yours, you got to walk it and step in those shoes and own it like it is.
Oh yeah, Your Honor, I'm so sorry. I should have been more prepared for this hearing. I apologize greatly. This is totally on me. But I've seen it, man. There's someone's like, listen, this is the partner's fault. I'm just a body. It's a pleasure to meet you, Your Honor.
Yeah.
Sorry about that one.
And then you go back to the firm and you say it's a pleasure to meet you because you've been fired for that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You get kicked out of court, kicked out of your firm, and you go on the street. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine going back to the office and going to the senior partner and be like, well, I lost, but I threw you under the bus the whole way.
It's cool. Don't order the transcript. Do not order the transcript.
The court reporter was sick anyway. Don't worry about it. That's fine. Okay.
Well, and that just actually brings, and I've asked Nate this question, I think, before, since we're joking about this. Can you think of an embarrassing moment that you personally had to go through like that in front of a judge or in the office or at a deposition?
Gosh, well, actually, even fairly recently, I mean, I think everyone has this story now, but I mean, so during a deposition, it was a construction defect deposition, and those, I mean, gosh, there's 50 people online, and it was a Zoom call, and my cat wants to do it somehow, right? He's like, I don't have thumbs, but I could figure this out. So he walks across my computer and unmutes and you could see the screen. He started the video, and you just see my cat just kind of strolling across, and he doesn't do it fast either, because that's just how cats are. So he's just gradually going across the screen. And I had my back turned for a moment because I didn't think anything was going on with the screen. And I turn, and there's just this cat just perusing across his deposition. I don't know if anyone caught it. If you caught it, I'm so sorry. Sorry for stopping your line of questions.
Was this before or after the video with the guy with the cat filter face?
Oh my gosh, it was way before. Dang it, I could have gone viral.
Yeah, that would have been your big ticket. You doing these memes and TikToks. That could have been it.
I know.
You could have taken
Oh,
off.
you're that guy with the really slow cat. Yeah, that's me. I'm Matt. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Well, that's actually not too bad. I mean, I think we all throughout the last year and a half had, I've had so many moments that my kids were under me, or they're popping behind me or to the side, or I've had there's been times I've been on these podcasts and I have a group of 10 kids outside, screaming and hollering, putting each other in trash cans and stuff. And I just have to act like awesome. all is normal.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. There's nothing behind you.
Nothing to see here.
Well, see, that's what I love about, about kind of all of this, right? Because we're at home, we're doing all these things. We've kind of shown our human side, and it's awesome because for the longest time, I'd see an older lawyer, right? And I'd be like, oh my gosh, they're so polished. They're like a machine. They're killing it. And then you're right. You hear maybe their kids in the background, or you see an animal, or you hear somebody yelling in their house. And I'm like, oh, they are human. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or even when you're talking to clients on the phone, and now that they're home, now I know my clients' dogs' names because I can hear them whining, and I'm like, oh, how's she doing? Give her a bone. And it makes it normalizes so much, because before, I still shush my kids when they try to interrupt me because I am on a work call and it's a little different from a dog, but it normalizes it. Everyone has things, and everyone has things outside of work, and it's kind of nice when you see some of those things.
Agreed. It makes me feel better, because I think as a younger attorney, when I come in and when most of us come in, we're like, oh my God, these people are so much better than me and they're so polished. You get that imposter syndrome. Everyone knows what they're doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. And there I am, I've had this happen where I'm in a deposition. I saw someone unmute on their line and their video, and they were doing laundry. And it was just before a break, so it was probably justified. And I saw that and I'm like, I know this attorney. This attorney is stellar. He is really good. And it made me feel better. I was like, you know what? We're all normal people. We're all doing the job, and no one's a robot and superior. And it kind of takes away that imposter syndrome, especially for a younger guy like myself.
Yeah.
So speaking of which, you're back in the office. Is your firm moved completely back, or hybrid, work from home when you want, or do you just choose to come in?
We are all back. I think if you wanted to work from home, we now have the capabilities. Mm-hmm. I'm talking to you through a work laptop that I've just been moving back in front from home. But yeah, so I guess, yes, we're back at home, but it can be a hybrid if you need it to be.
Okay. So, and I wanted to transition over to your, I guess I want to call it your branding. You're the millennial. Am I getting you're the millennial attorney? So how did you come up with this? Because I love it. I think it's such a great way to promote yourself, but it also, it kind of gives people an idea of how you might approach cases different and with a fresh look.
I appreciate it. I gotta start making shirts or something. Matt, millennial lawyer. I'm gonna be the only one that buys them, but at least somebody is.
Well, your wife might wear one.
I don't know. No. So coming up with the brand, I think it started more or less. I think I started using the hashtag originally because maybe it was a little catchy, and I'm like, yeah, I'm a millennial. I do want people to know me for that. And then I think I posted on LinkedIn, and I was so angry one day because I was just getting thrashed, not because of my skill as being an attorney, but being my age. And I posted a long post, and I said, I don't have to have gray hair to be good at my job. Granted, I do have some gray hair, it's hiding, but I don't have to have gray hair to be really good at my job. I can be a fantastic attorney and just be a little bit younger than the rest of the crowd. So people were super receptive to it. And I realized, maybe the millennial, I guess, generation, because, there's a lot of they only eat avocado toast, and they're lazy and they're procrastinators and whatnot. Well, maybe there needs to be a voice of somebody coming in there saying, hey, as a younger guy, I work hard. I work hard, and I produce great work product, and we look at things a little bit differently because of how we grew up. I mean, we grew up I think we were more or less the generation that really grew up technologically with it. I mean, the next generation, oh my gosh, they're leaps and bounds away from us. But at least how we started. So like for me, like how I look at a claim now maybe is I look at a claim more or less in analytics. I look at a claim and I say, all right, at the very beginning, how much is this claim going to cost to defend it? How much do I believe reasonable settlement value is as I sit here today? Looking at other claims of a similar caliber that we've personally dealt with. How many of those claims did we win on summary judgment? How many of those claims did we not win on summary judgment? How many claims did we actually take to trial to verdict? How many of them settled just before trial? And I look at all these numbers and you could look at it and it kind of spits out, all right, this is at least what I think is going to happen with this claim. This is what I believe reasonable settlement value. If we think we're going to settle, this is the cost of defense. And I think maybe as a millennial, that's kind of the new thing for us is we're looking at everything much more analytically and much more data driven because we have the capability to do so.
Yeah, and I love that too, because it's kind of the same approach that we take too. Like at the very beginning of a case, you should, at least in the first 30 to 60 days, you should have a good idea of like how much it's going to cost and how you're getting out of this, and be able to tell your client, like, look, we can pound the road for 2 years trying to get that win for you at trial, but it's going to cost you, $120,000, or we can settle it probably soon for 30. Like, what do you want to do? Like, what looks more appealing on your side? And it's also client based. Not all clients want to hear that. Sure. Like some clients don't, they want to push it down the road, or everyone's a little bit different, but I think being able to step in and have that outlook at the very beginning is very valuable. And it's different than what I think has always been done, throughout time, I should say. Like, I think it's a change.
Yeah, I think certainly when you look at older attorneys, and you were talking about this, Matt, how do you compete with older folks that have all this experience, or they look at you and you have less experience? And if you read their bios, they've been doing it for 35 years, they've done all these trials and everything. But I do think the more I meet folks that are in their 60s, they're kind of at the twilight of their legal career, the more I see that they are very focused on putting their head down and defending from the get-go. Don't look at the myriad of ways you can resolve this. And it's not everyone, of course, I'm generalizing. But it's just, I think back in the day, it was very much like you get a claim in, take deps, do discovery, just defend it, whatever, and then maybe resolve it right before trial. And now there's so many ways to do this with mediations, virtual mediations, court-driven arbitrations, non-court-driven arbitration. I mean, there's so many ways to do this at the outset, or even just informally over the phone, that I think your generation and younger folks in general look at that much more from the front end, and they have the technology to look at past claims quickly. I mean, we can, in our firm, I'm sure yours too, we can look at all the past claims that have the same injury, involve the same product, in the same venues in 30 seconds. And I don't think that was the case in the 80s, certainly, or in the 90s, right?
And I have to point out, like, sorry to interrupt, a lot of those older, more experienced, seasoned attorneys are the same ones that would have a written timesheet. They probably put an 8.5 review file, and that and that would be just fine. I mean, we are under different metrics these days, and a lot of the carriers have outside vendors who are analyzing our bills down to the 0.1, and you have to be very, very detailed and exact about things. So you, like, all our analytics are being looked at on the carrier side as well. We need to have them on our end to be able to be competitive.
I couldn't agree more. We're going to reach an inflection point at some point where it's like so like almost like in an initial report, I may be asked, okay, right now I want to know the data. I want to know the data and what your firm believes at this time, actual real chances are of, settling before summary judgment, settling before trial, or getting actual data included at the very forefront. So an adjuster, a desk adjuster, can look and say, no, we're settling this now, or no, we're going for it. And you can make those decisions much earlier, you're right, than going just before trial and settling.
Right.
And sometimes the hardest thing to do is convince the insured. I don't know if we report to both, I'm sure you do too. Yeah. And so oftentimes the carrier will say, just as a pure rubric for numbers, right, the value. But then when you try to tell the insured, the person that made the product, or whatever, the person that put their heart and soul into it, it's tougher to say, yeah, let's pay out on this when they in their mind think that it could have been avoided, or their safety features should have been used, et cetera. So there's definitely a dynamic between convincing just the value-based carrier and then the emotion-based, sometimes insured.
True. I mean, it's the beauty of the tripartite relationship, right? Like my client is always the insured and forever will be the insured. And those, and I get it, right? I get that as well, because there's also a goodwill factor in terms of settling a case. Like maybe they feel exposed at that point, and maybe more claims will come. And it's hard. It's definitely a juggling act to make sure everyone's interests are properly handled, especially the insured, again, who's ultimately your client.
Right.
Now, have you, since, you've started your marketing, branding or anything, have you gotten any pushback from any of, without naming names or firms or anything like that? Have you gotten pushback as to like how you're approaching things?
Yeah, I've gotten it. I've gotten it. I'll say that. It's different, right? I think if you're not bound by a law firm, if you're not bound by those kinds of situations, you could probably, and for anyone listening, my paralegal, who's the greatest paralegal of all time, just dropped something off of my desk, and she's a rock star.
Did she get some camera time? We're on camera here.
She just walked out. I wish she stayed.
Okay.
Shout out to Yoli. She's killing it. So, so yeah, listen, I'm getting some pushback. I'm getting pushback, and not to speak very aggressive about it, but when you're not bound by a law firm, you could say what you want. And when you're in a law firm, there's always the fear of upsetting a client, upsetting a carrier, upsetting another referral source or what have you. So I've definitely heard from some older attorneys, and I'm not saying at my firm, and I'm not saying at previous firms that I've been a part of, but generally speaking, I've heard some comments, and I've seen the wag of the finger. That being said, I'm like, don't do that. And I'm like, this is virtual. I don't even know how you're doing this. So, but then I've seen this outpour of support from attorneys that are, that love it, that love to laugh, that love to see the human side of the legal profession, that love that we can take a legal topic and we can condense it into a meme, a GIF, a video, a TikTok quickly and concisely. So the general public knows what we're doing and knows within 60 seconds. So I've gotten definitely some hate and some love.
Well, but you're always going to get some hate. And when you get some hate, you're doing something right. But what I think is so beautiful about your approach is in a way, you're dumbing down like the nitty gritty of some legal issues, so the general population may be able to understand it. Isn't that what we want to do for a jury or even to a client or an insured who might not be as familiar with the legal aspects? But if you're able to explain something in lay person's terms so anyone can understand, that is what we're supposed to be doing. In addition to evaluating the and all that stuff, but like we need to translate and make things understandable. And I think what you're doing is doing it in a perfect way that is like relatable too.
I appreciate it. It's like, I'll give you an example. I had a friend of mine reach out to me fairly recently. He goes, look, don't look at me funny. Don't think I'm stupid, but what is mediation? I don't understand what mediation is. I don't understand even the concept. And I'm like, you're not stupid. I was like, have you ever been to a mediation? No. Do you know anyone who's ever been in a mediation? No. Is there any reason for you to even know what a mediation is? There's any situation where you'd have to know? No. All right. It's not a big deal. A mediation, for everyone listening, a mediation is a room where we get in with a neutral third party who tries to facilitate some sort of deal between the parties, right? So I show up with my client, maybe if it's an insurance company who's paying the bill as a carrier, the other side shows up with their client, and we just try to reach some sort of resolution at some point in time during the litigation. And I explained that to him, and he was like, look, I appreciate it. No one has ever taken the time to explain a concept like that. And it kind of dawned on me, like, I don't have to be a lawyer all the time. We can explain things in it, right? Exactly, in a very human way, and get everyone on board so everyone can have a meaningful conversation about some of these legal topics.
Right. It's the same idea with deposition. And I'm guilty of it. I throw on deposition, like all my friends who work in like PR understand what it means. And it's like, they probably don't, but they probably nod and be like, sure, whatever, whatever you say sounds legally. But it like, sometimes we have a tendency to throw out, these terms that we just presume that the party on the other end knows what we're talking about. And you have to kind of bring it back a little bit and, explain it, or just not bore your friends with work stuff.
Well, I always assume if it happened in one movie, everyone knows. That's my whole thing, right? So if I say deposition, they're like, what? I'm like, Jesse Eisenberg and The Social Network, the movie was kind of based around a series of depositions. So what? I'm like, everyone was at a table and they're questioning, oh, that? I didn't know it was called a deposition. I mean, right. So I just assumed everyone, cross-examination, a few good men, everyone knows it, but they don't know it's cross-examination. They just know
exactly
you can't handle the truth. So, and that doesn't really explain it all. So anyway, but yeah, I think it's a great way to explain things. And I think that one of the things that works so well with who's the other I'm going to forget his name, Alex Sue, is that
Alex
his name?
Sue?
I mean,
that's great.
And you both do awesome stuff. But the cool thing is we're in such a stodgy career. If we were comedians, making funny memes wouldn't be that outrageous. But the fact that people look at attorneys as being so black and white and serious and stodgy, and you make memes, it's like, I think it shows a whole other side of the person's personality. And I think a potential client would look at that and say, wow, the person clearly knows what they're doing. I mean, they can look at your education and your background and everything, but I'd want to call them on the phone and talk about a case because it wouldn't be drab. It wouldn't be terrible to talk to this person twice a week for 2 years while litigation's going on,
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
And also it goes back to the ability, like when people see that you're able to like boil things down and kind of put some humor into it, that when you're talking to a client or a claims adjuster or something on the phone, you're not gonna be like, well, in the case, Collins versus, Jordan, this is what the holding was.
Cannot compute.
Which, I mean, I don't know many people who do that either, but I think it humanizes us a little bit. And it humanizes the insurance industry as well, and I think that, I've talked to a lot of people in claims, and there is this big need on the side of insurance to humanize the insurance industry. So it's not, the big bad insurance company, but more so like, look, we are trying to help you. We are trying to help our insureds, or we're trying to help the claimant, but it's just a matter of how much. We might not be helping you $1 million. We just have to figure out what's appropriate.
Agreed. It's I think, is it reptile theory? Is that what the theory is, where these companies are getting reptiled, where they're almost inherently the bad guy, like they've just been locked into this role. And I apologize to anyone listening if I just butchered what the theory ultimately is, but I agree that's the problem too. Also with the insurance industry is you're already losing. You're already on the losing side the moment you step in. And I agree, if we could provide such a human perspective and people really understand the other side, and not, you're right, just this robotic company that almost is, people look at it as almost like a bankroll, right? Oh, where's the insurance check? Where's the insurance check? I mean, that really, I believe, would do wonders, especially in the age of nuclear verdicts, where that's running rampant.
Yeah. And Sherry Billets will probably listen and correct all our use of terminology.
She immediately came to mind.
Yeah.
You're using reptile theory incorrectly. I don't know. I think we're using it right. Sherry, let us know. But it's funny that you bring up nuclear verdicts, though. What is the landscape in Florida right now with nuclear verdicts? Because I mean, especially like where you are, Miami area, like I hear it's just not a good place to be.
No, it's I've heard it's systemic, right? Like I've seen news articles about it, but I mean, I think people have seen definitely some interesting verdicts on this side. If I recall correctly, there was a trucking company that got hit. Granted, the circumstances were a little weird. I don't think they showed up for the trial. They did defend up until that point. I think they got hit for like $450 million in Quincy, Florida.
Wait, why wouldn't they show up to trial?
I don't fully remember what happened. There was maybe a disagreement with counsel. All I know is towards the end, something had happened where they were an empty chair. But that being said, let's say there's an empty chair at trial.
Yeah. I
don't think you're going to see $450 million. I think you'll see maybe $40 million, and that's on the high end. But it ended up being $450 million. I've seen verdicts down here getting in the 20, 30, $40 million. And it's crazy. It's a bit crazy. I think there was another one recently, a mold case. I think it was $100 million in Broward County or something truly absurd. And again, the numbers I may be inflating at this point just because I don't remember, but it's definitely the landscape is changing. Juries are changing, and in South Florida, especially in Miami, it's definitely no different.
Yeah. So, and if you notice, like it's just a trend changing for the worse.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So and listen, that might be our fault, guys. I apologize in advance. I think I'll say that any millennial listening, I think you can't blame us for the rise of the avocado toast, but you may be able to rise at least somewhat for the millennial, the nuclear verdict. So I think there's a fundamental difference of how we look at money. I think at this point, I think you see still a lot of celebrities online, and you see a lot of billionaires and high value individuals that are like, instinctively, like Jeff Bezos has almost, some odd billions of dollars, or the Kardashians have some crazy amount of money, or the youngest Kardashian has $1 billion or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the money stops to lose its value. I think we've grown up with that. I think definitely the generation below me also has grown up with even more so. So money almost has become no object, at least in my mind.
Well,
so even, I feel like I'll sit on a jury and someone's going to say, well, members of the jury, meds are $150,000. Like, that's not enough. He needs more than that. No, he's definitely I know how much medical costs because my health insurance is so expensive, and I know, and I've seen, he needs at least $3 million for the future, $4 million for medical for the future. And that's just kind of, I think, how we're all starting to think.
I mean,
sorry.
Go ahead. I was going to say
that. You're the host. You're the hostess. I'm hands off.
I was just going to say, like, as for the younger generation, I think it's even worse because, like, my kids see these, like, 10-year-olds on YouTube making $22 million a year, and they want a YouTube channel, and I'm all for it. If they want a YouTube channel, they can bring in $22 million a year. Have at it. But yeah, it's like the money has no, like, I think the younger generations have money is just so, like, not an issue, because I think when we grew up, or at least when I grew up, I think things were tighter, and it was just, I think you just saw I don't know. It just seemed different than it is now. Now it's like, oh, buy me this, get me this. It's just, it's just money.
Well, it's almost like publicizing. If we lived in the era of the Vanderbilts, right, and they were publicizing heavily the Vanderbilts, like, oh, look at all this money, and everyone's like, oh, well, the Vanderbilts have this, or let's say there was a bunch of different Vanderbilts, and they were the personalities of the generation. I think maybe at that time, and I'm speculating, and Sherry may, or another psychologist may slap me down for this, but I think maybe you would see maybe a similar result, because you're like, well, they have $40 trillion. I mean, it's obviously not that much money, or it's a lot of money, but what's 4 million to 40 trillion?
Yeah. I think certainly with the rise of celebrity with rich people, like, Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, those people, I think people on juries say, if we hit them a company for 100 million, it's going to come out of that person's pocket, and they have one less yacht this year, maybe, and they really helped this person out who was really badly injured. When it's not the case. The case is that $100 million loss is spread amongst everyone, and then the company might have to let people go. Everyone's premiums go up. I mean, it's not the person at the top doesn't get dinged for a couple $1 million, and they just take the loss. It's going to affect the bottom line of this company, where your friend may work, or you may have an insurance or investments with that company or something like that, right? So it's not as clear cut as take from the person and give to the person. It doesn't work.
That's an awesome point. That is a really good point.
Thank you, Matt.
But, listen, I'm all with it. I'm sitting here, I'm like, that's
all the years.
Like,
Megan has never said good point to me on any podcast. So thank you for your acknowledgement.
Well, for that one, it was like in my brain. I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing in there, man? Get out. That was awesome.
Well,
I'm sorry, Nate.
No, I'm kidding. I don't say anything.
I just revealed the cracks in the relationship with that one.
This is the last podcast we'll see you on. Thank you for listening.
No, I lost my train of thought, but I think, taking, like, comparing to, like, the time of the Vanderbilts versus now, but everything's publicized now. Like, we have access to so much information, and we know so much about everybody. Whereas, back in Vanderbilt time, I don't think you didn't have the same, you didn't really know how the Vanderbilts were living. You just knew that they were rich, and they owned the city, if you even knew that. But now it's like, everything, and money just seems to be no object for for these large companies. And so I think, it just gets like, it loses the dollar loses its actual dollar value. It's worth a lot less in the minds of a jury, I think.
What's $5 million to 10 billion? What's $5 million? What is it? $5 million. I mean, now in my head, I'm thinking if I make $1 million in the lottery, and $1 million is still a lot of money, but but is it though? I mean, honestly, $1 million, you could really crush $1 million rather quickly, at least in this day and age, especially with inflation. So what's $5 million? What's $10 million? Honestly, what's $20 million? And I say that and I sound so ridiculous, but I believe that's the mindset, at least of some juries or at least some jurors, when they see what's being asked for and ultimately what they think is fair.
And of course, I think the savvy jurors will add in the rubric of the plaintiff's attorney's contingency fee, right? Mm-hmm. So they'll know, hey, 40% is not going to the pocket of this person.
Yeah, so. But I don't know, like I don't know how savvy people. I don't know how savvy the average Joe is about that relationship. I don't know.
I think most people have had a relative, at least, right, file suit at some point for something in their life, and they know that it's at least a third, if not more. I think. I don't know. I mean, maybe people aren't. I don't know. But I have to think they look at the person up there in the suit every day. They think, well, they got to get paid. I wonder how much they're getting paid, you know? And now that it's the traditional now is 40%. I don't know what it used to be. But that's a chunk. I mean, that's almost half of what the number is. So.
Right. So going off of that, like, so Matt, you being in a area that has a larger potential exposure, I'm sure that really does go into your initial evaluation when you're talking to your clients, being like, look, this is in a potential nuclear verdict jurisdiction. So, you know, while I can tell you, you know, I think the pure exposure is X, it could be, you know, triple Z if we get in the wrong place, but you can't control that. I guess Sherry Bell to tell us how to control it, but
you're going to get her on. I want to be on when Sherry comes on.
Oh, I love having, we'll have her on again. I love having Sherry on.
This is the plug to Sherry. She's stellar. Give her a call.
I think I filmed a podcast 2 days ago, and I think Sherry got a shout out during that one too. Her ears must be ringing.
You gotta have like a Sherry counter.
Yeah.
Like 3 today.
I'll have to text her after this. Be like, man, you're all over the place.
So
but again, so I mean, when you go to your clients and when you're talking about your initial outlook, I mean, that has to come into play, that you have you're in this potential nuclear verdict jurisdiction.
Yeah, most, if not all of my initial evaluations, for example, I make it known, if we're in Miami, exactly, that, listen, this is a jurisdiction that may favor higher exposure verdicts or higher verdicts. And that's something I definitely want it to be known. If the facts support, hey guys, maybe a heads up, then you always have to report, right? You always have to report probably more than you probably should, but I always tend to lean on the more cautious side. So I agree. I try to report as much as I can. There's sometimes, you're right, it comes out of nowhere. I've heard about that happening too, where it's what you believe to be like, again, a mold case, or mold, especially mold in an apartment complex or something where what you would believe to be not a traditional high exposure case, you get hit with $10 million. I mean, sometimes it's like, how do you even report that? Where previous verdicts maybe are in $20,000, $30,000, $40,000.
I do think something like mold, though, can spark a very visceral reaction from people. I don't, like black mold, like people just think about it invading their homes and ruining their lives. It's kind of like a bed bug situation. I think people would they have such personal feelings about it that I really think it can spark, even though maybe the damage is only $15,000, but people be like, oh, but if I had mold, man, like that would ruin everything,
I think the key is you don't know you have it, right? Like if it's something that's visible, you're like, wow, I have that. If there's something leaking or something, but mold is like silently killing you overnight. And I think there's like this, you're right, there's like this seedy element to it.
Yeah. It's like,
I don't want to go against you on a mold case. That hurt. Yeah, well, never mind.
I'm a storyteller, man.
Right for nuclear verdicts. I come from a Floridian perspective, which is probably my problem for talking about mold, because for me, I've always grown up and it's like there's mold because everything's so wet. There's mold everywhere.
Yeah,
it's raining right now.
Really?
So I tell you, so that maybe mold isn't the best example. It is for me only because I just know mold is forever present, but. Anything of that sense, a slip and fall, a general slip and fall that really had minor medical issues. Same thing where you don't know it. You could have a jury and it's just $10 million out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just can't report it. Just doesn't
know. How viable is moving outside to the counties? I'm assuming that the suburban and rural counties. I mean, so my wife is from North Central Florida, so she's from like 45 minutes north of Gainesville, like Waldo, Stark area.
Yeah.
And she went to UF, so I'm obligated to say that she doesn't like Florida State. Okay, so there you have it. But anyway,
but your points were not that good.
What's that?
I have to take it back. I'm like, your points aren't that good.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad you based it on that. But I mean, can you move cases out to the counties or remove to federal court pretty regularly, or is that something that's tougher to do in the verdict in the jury zone, the venue zone? I'm sorry.
I'll say this: rural counties, are a little bit better. Then again, there was that verdict in Quincy, which I was talking about. Fact's a little weird, but that was Quincy's just north of Tallahassee. But I would say rural counties are a little bit better inherently. Am I moving things to rural counties or federal court? Federal court sometimes, rural counties, if the claim resides in Miami, I'm more or less stuck. Right?
Yeah. I mean, we run into some, like, I think of Philadelphia and Miami somewhat similarly. Although I will say Philly used to be like a judicial hellhole, and like the stats lately, actually, the defense verdicts are almost as even as plaintiff's verdicts in recent years. But I think one of the issues in Philly is motion practice, and getting fair consideration of motions in Philly is not something that you get a lot of. And is that something that's similar in the Miami jurisdiction for you?
I won't say that. I won't say that because I say the judiciary in all Florida is inherently fair, and they're just doing their jobs, and they are so. Any judge listening to this, you guys are so overloaded. You're great people, all of you. I'm so sorry you have to deal with all of these backlog of cases. So I won't speak to that only because I'm in front of those folks on a daily basis.
With a sweep of the hair.
You like that? I was like, if you're listening, I'm sorry. Don't grant my motion for summary judgment.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I clearly don't care, but.
Yeah, we've actually talked about that topic on here before.
Well, I mean, I do think it is something when I'm talking to a client, though, when I'm considering whether or not we want to get things moved to federal court out of a state court. Sometimes you're in a decent state court jurisdiction, but looking at it, you're like, well, but I might get a better consideration on, if we're looking at this as a summary judgment motion case, I might get a better consideration on this motion if I move it here. Also because of that backlog. I mean, a lot of the state courts are so backlogged, and the federal courts just have a rocket docket and they move very quickly. So sometimes those motions get more consideration, when you get it out of state court, depending on, where you sit. And other times you don't, but it is definitely something I always look at early on, be like, is it worth it? Is it worth the move? And if I'm looking at doing X, Y, and Z, will I have a better chance if I move it?
That's a fair point too. I mean, look, you're effectively getting rid of the hearings as well once you remove it to federal court. So if you've got a smooth talking attorney on the other side, and you kind of cut their legs from under them, I mean, that's also a consideration as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, the federal bench certainly doesn't deal with the nonsense. They don't let plaintiffs' counsels wait till month 14 to give a demand and month 18 to give their discovery responses. I mean, we just had an initial call the other day with the court in a case in New York in federal court. It was an hour and 20 minutes long. And the judge was like, what's the demand? What's this case worth? Settle. It's basically telling plaintiffs' counsel, settle this, right? Come on, get rid of it. I mean, it's so great to have almost someone on your side. Not on your side, that sounds bad, but forcing the nonsense out, as you go along.
Agreed.
So looking back at, or thinking towards like the individuals coming out of law school now, what sort of advice would you give them to set themselves apart, to be able to, serve clients better, impress upon, the use of the law firm, or the older generation? What sort of advice would you give them?
So my biggest advice, I say this to everybody, is know what you're getting yourself into. We don't talk about the business of law. We don't talk about what goes into actually, what are the numbers, right? So I posted about this fairly recently about profitability. knowing about profitability because it affects what you're ultimately going to get paid, or knowing what billing requirements are at certain firms, or knowing that certain types of law will require likely higher billable requirements because the rates are a little bit lower, or vice versa, or certain firms where you're going to expect to see more cuts because the work is, maybe it lends itself to being cut more often. So that all being said, know what you're getting yourself into, know where you're going to be working. Don't just take a leap. The job market is stellar right now, is absolutely stellar. Take your time and figure out exactly what firm best fits you. You can look at my LinkedIn. I am what they would call a job hopper. And I'll be the first to admit it. I was cautioned against it. And I'll tell you this, don't be afraid to leave your firm if you don't think it's the right fit. Now, that being said, don't hop, but find the place that fits. Some place will fit for you. It won't be 100%, but it'll fit. And before you get to that place, make sure you're running the numbers and it makes sense to you. Don't jump in because, feet first, with just straight an emotional decision. So, I mean, I say that, I think that's something I've seen a lot of my friends and, even myself get into, and it's not a good result.
And I mean, I saw that post that you did. It was like a week or so ago about the profitability. And I think it was such an important point to bring up, and something that I think, like, when I was starting out, I was very unaware of that business side of practicing. And frankly, at that point, like, I was just trying to learn how to do my job. So I wasn't that worried about it. But as you move forward in your career, you have to be very cognizant of it. Like, how much am I billing per hour? How much are we getting back on that? What's getting cut from the bills? Like, you might be billing, 200 hours a month, but if, 25% of that it's getting cut, then you're not that as profitable as you may think. So I think it's very important to be cognizant of that and, like, be aware of it. And I don't think a lot of younger attorneys are. Agreed.
You run into a scenario too, where it's like, maybe you're super profitable. Your collections are 100% or 99%. Your rates are high, you're doing great work, you're billing a lot, and maybe you're just underpaid. That's by knowing your profitability, or at least around what your profitability is. Listen, that's a conversation you could start having with your employer. Conversely, if you're upset because you're not getting paid a lot and you're really not billing that much, or your rates are kind of low and you're getting cut like crazy, don't leave. There's a reason for it. There's a reason you're not getting paid so much, potentially at least. And it may be because of your profitability.
Yeah. But it also goes to an evaluation of, like, how you want to work though too. Like, True. do you want to be at, is it in, like, some people like to be at a place that they have, 50 files, you have a low rate per hour you bill, and you just churn. And that might work for some people. Other people, maybe you bill at a little higher rate, you have less files and you have more time to, like, marinate and think. I personally like that, but everyone's a little bit different about what works for them, and certain things work for you at different points in your career too.
True. Yeah. I mean, right now, I don't have children, so I don't have that effectively that time is still on my plate. So for me, I can bill a little bit more, I can get a little bit more into it. But the moment we have a family or we start a bigger family, I mean, that's the biggest consideration. I want to be home and I want to have some level of work-life balance where I can take care of my kids. I'm not missing any sort of issue. I want to be there for the football game or the dance recital, whatever it may be. So definitely that's also a consideration as well.
Yeah. I think I've had this conversation with Nate a few times, because that was a turning point for me, because I was working, my butt off, weekends, late nights, whatever. And then as soon as I had kids, it all changed. Like, it's like, I will say when they were younger and they still napped on the weekends, I would still get stuff in on the weekends. But now it's like their weekends are full of their stuff, that I want to be at, and or just be around. So it does change your whole perspective. And it definitely can change, like, where you are. You could be at a firm that you're churning, and then suddenly your priorities change. You're like, well, maybe this isn't the right place for me now because I want this balance. Or you just change your perspective where you are. It just depends. I've had this conversation with Nate till I was, like, blue in the face.
I get yelled at for emailing the firm at like 5 a.m. on a Saturday, or whatever. I'm an early riser, so I'm like,
you're bad.
Yeah,
you're a bad guy,
Nate. I get stuff from Megan, like, what? Relax, just go take a walk. I'm like, well, I'm like you. I don't have kids, so I'm trying to always pump out hours, always market, always, I'm trying to always do that. And with, if changes come soon with me having kids, it's going to have to be put on the back burner. So I'm trying to get it in now while I can.
Nate will be like, why is no one responding? I was like, well, you emailed at 8:30 on a Sunday morning, so just wait till tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm the mindset is slowly changing a little bit. And I think I got an email on a Sunday around like, I don't know, it was maybe like 10 or 11 a.m. And I looked at that email and I was like disgusted with the sender. No offense, Nate. I'm not attacking you.
Thanks a lot.
But in that particular moment,
I was listeners, it was Nate. It was Nate who sent that email.
We don't work together. I swear it wasn't Nate. But no, I get it. I understand. I agree with you, Nate. Like it's at that point, I think priorities will change. And from there, it's another conversation. It's another, it's an evaluation or reevaluation of what you're ultimately doing.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, it kind of changes the course of the podcast a little bit, but I mean, I think firms now especially through like this whole pandemic, I think everyone's becoming a little more work-life friendly than before, since work life was just all together. But I think there's also a negative too. I think it also, since everything kind of joined together, everyone's like, well, you can always be at work because work's at home and, everyone's home. So there's where are you going? No one's going anywhere.
Yeah. Mike, we did one of the podcast guests, Matt, was my dad. My dad's a psychologist. And we talked about, you should listen to it. I think it's a pretty good podcast, but we talked about, some of the differences between working in the 80s and 90s and now. And he said, it's great that you're always available. You're always on, you're always, you can avail yourself to clients and they can avail themselves to you. But he said, there's something to be said psychologically for the drive home, the walk home, the bus ride home, the train ride home, to decompress and get ready for family life. And he said, when he's a professor, he's starting his 43rd year at the same university. He's a professor. He said, when I first started, my syllabus would be half a page, or my syllabus would be half a page, and at the bottom would say, do not contact me outside work hours. Now he has his personal email, his personal phone, his cell phone, call me anytime. I mean, he said, that's just what's expected now. What's expected is availability at every moment, all the time. And he said, that's really draining. And there's something, like I said, there's something psychologically, a benefit to, I'm on my way to work. Let me get in work mode. I'm on my way home from work. And now I'm done. It's 5:30. I'm done. And I can focus on other stuff. Now it's never like that. It's never like that.
I couldn't agree more. And I didn't think we were going to talk about the burnout, but the burnout is definitely right. The burnout is probably one of the biggest problems, I think, for millennials is, look, I've got my phone right here. These are the notifications you could see already, guys. Right. So it's a reality. You'd like to shut off the phone. You'd like to shut off the computer. You'd like to shut off everything, but it's omnipresent. It's always there. The work never stops, or at least it doesn't stop unless you can figure out a way to control your life and control your schedule. And that's something that comes with time. It comes with experience. Listen, for the longest time, same thing, where I'm just sitting behind a desk and I'm just billing. Night and day, I'm taking phone calls at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, 10 p.m. or 11 or 12, and I'm still going. And it takes a conscious effort to kind of pull yourself back and maybe shutting off the phone, or maybe shutting off the social media for a minute, which I know for me is a problem, but shutting off the computer and putting on an out of office on your email. And but I agree, it's ever present, and it's been resulting in a lot of burnout for especially some of my friends. And listen, I've felt it. I've definitely felt it myself.
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone gets it. I felt, especially, again, I keep bringing it back to this past year, but this past year, I think the burnout felt especially hard because we didn't have that drive home, or I actually worked from home quite a bit before the pandemic, but then suddenly when my kids are home too, like it just felt very like the walls were closing in, like you just didn't have that decompression time. I mean, even now, it's like, okay, I work till 5:30, then you shut your computer, you're like, okay, now I have to get off to bring someone to swim practice, bring someone here and that. So, I think it's more important than ever to schedule that time that you take the long weekend and you take the Monday or the Friday off, you take a whole week vacation and you actually do not check email, and you realize that okay, if there's an emergency, there's someone else who can handle it. Mm-hmm. If not, it can probably wait a week, but it's hard.
No, agreed. I stopped myself, and I'll admit this on this podcast, I stopped myself from posting at least what I believe to be a fairly aggressive LinkedIn post on hustle culture, right? Well, I'm sure you guys have seen it, like those videos and where it's like, to be rich, you need to work every day of your life, at every moment, at every time. You have to skip birthdays and funerals and everything that you hold dear in your life. You need to skip it and hustle and grind, hustle and grind. And I just can't get behind it anymore. I think I agree with COVID, especially where we were constantly on. It's not conducive to living. I think you'll burn out and it doesn't end well for anybody.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think like that hustle and grind, I wish I could be that person. I think I was at one point, but now I'm like, I can't, like, there's too many other things to do.
Yeah. You gotta live your life.
Right. And I don't want to look back, when I'm, old and gray and be like, oh, I missed, these years because I was so, so focused on just the hustle and grind that I missed like these magical, years, even without kids. Like, I don't want to miss this time of my life too. Like, work is important, but life is important.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
So we are just about out of time, but I have one final question for you. So
that's a doozy.
You don't even know which one it's going to be.
It's about avocado toast.
These are the personal ones. We get ready.
All right, let's do it.
Oh man, now you're under pressure. Now I'm like,
I'm sorry.
Which of my catalog of end of questions should I do?
Yep.
Okay, I might have two. All right. So this is, I think this is less hard. So if you weren't an attorney, what other career do you think you would be or be in?
I've done a lot of shout outs on this podcast. I'm going to shout out to my mom on this one. I probably, because of her guilt, loving guilt, I probably would have been a weatherman. I probably would have been on the news and been a meteorologist and been like, today it's raining. Well, it's raining right now. So currently it's raining. So that would have, shout out mom, you won this one. So it would have been a weather person.
What about politics? You said you were interested in politics. What about going back to
I love the government work, and I wanted to go into politics. I wanted to be a lobbyist or someone that was working, inside of these agencies. And it's watching sausage being made. You might not want to eat sausage anymore. So I'm happy with just telling people watching how weather is being made is cool. I'm all for that. So I'm happy to be a weather person in that event.
And you only need to be like right 60% of the time.
That's it. That's right now I have to be 100%. 60 is the dream.
I had this vision for you, Matt, where like Marco Rubio ends his tenure and you take over as the new Florida State Senator. I just could see that happening,
That would be funny. That would be really funny.
See, that wasn't that hard of a question, Nate.
No, it wasn't bad.
That's because I said something. You dumbed it down a little bit.
No, that was my original question. But
okay.
I mean, do you want to ask a hard question?
No, I don't like the hard questions.
We did this. Nate and I did a podcast. I just asked him we asked each other hard questions. We didn't know what each other were going to ask, and he would be like, "Ask me these softballs," and I'd be like, "So, what was your childhood like?"
Yeah. I was like, I expected to get out a pen and pad, and I lay down on the couch and she takes notes. I expected that to be dissecting my childhood.
Oh my gosh. What's the second question? I'm so nervous.
All right. No, that's not bad.
Okay.
It's more fun. So what's one movie that you can watch over and over, regardless of how many times you've seen it?
See, this is a hard question. What, guys?
Well, Nate picked like the whole Avengers,
I just said the Marvel movies are fun. My favorite movie is Braveheart, but I can't watch it every day. That would be intense,
That's
right?
fair.
So if Iron Man's on, I'm like, okay, that's mindless. I can do that.
Nate was like basically this catalog of 25 movies I can watch at any point.
What did you say? Princess Bride? What was your answer?
Oh, Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
It's Step Brothers.
Yes, that was my second one. I love Step Brothers.
Wow.
I could watch it every single day.
Yeah, me too.
Good choice.
So much more room for activities.
Drum set. A damn drum set.
Oh, I love that movie. So anyway, Matt, it was so great having you on. Why don't you let our listeners know where they can find you so they can follow you on LinkedIn and, see the content that you put out?
I appreciate it. So my LinkedIn, I think my link is linkedin.com/Florida trial attorney.
Okay.
You find me on LinkedIn just by looking me up, Matthew Margolis. Or Matt Margolis. I'm based in Boca. My email, if you want to get a hold of me, and listen, if you're a younger attorney, especially, and you just want to talk, I'm open. Just please give me a call or send me an email. My email is mmargolis@sbwh.law.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and hope to have you on again in the future. We'll have to get Sherry in. We already got all these guests. Maybe your mom. We get a lot of people.
I've had so many shout outs. We just have to do individual people for the shout outs.
Your cat. We have your cat, please.
It's the best
slow walking cat. Yeah.
I'm not a cat. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure to be honest with you.
Thanks,
It's been
Matt.
great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.